All right, so this is our Ministering to Gen Z and Gen Alpha class. A real quick survey. They say Gen Z, I think, is born between 97 and 2012. So who is Gen Z in here? Let's go. So you guys can actually come teach this class about how to minister to yourselves, okay? So we got Gen Alpha is after 2012, I guess. That's our daughter. And then we have the betas that just came. That's my son, all right? He is a beta, all right? He's an 8-month-old beta, all right? Right. So if there's anything saying you don't agree with, just let me know and we can kind of talk about it. So this is how we're going to do the class. Basically, I think everyone got a handout. The way we're going to do it is basically there are 5, let's just say flavors or qualities of this generation. And so we're going to talk through some of those, and then we're going to talk through 5 kind of like practices under each of those. I'm just going to kind of give a framework, and then I'd love just to have a discussion together and just kind of, I think some of the best part of these conferences is you just get to swap ideas and hear what you guys are doing, because you guys are actively trying to minister to Gen Z in many ways. So I'd love to, under some of these things, just kind of get your feedback on it, There's just a scripture that to me is just kind of an interesting one. You guys might know the men of, go back to this one, men of Issachar. 1 Chronicles 12. It's this list of all these different groups of people, and there's like warriors and chiefs and all this kind of stuff. And then it says there's these guys from Issachar. They weren't chiefs or, warriors. It's men who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. 200 chiefs with all their relatives under their command. So all we know about these guys is that they understood the times. Now, sometimes, I don't know if you guys heard this phrase. Anytime you talk about Gen Z, it's like, guys, this is way different. The world's never been like this before. And there's a lot of that, which in many ways is very true. I bet, if you were to talk to any generation, that's kind of been what they've said about the next generation most times, right? So sometimes I feel like that can be a little bit overblown with like, this is a unique generation that they need special, unique things more than any other one. All of it, it's kind of like making ice cream. Ice cream has, kind of the same basic things that you need to make it, but then it has kind of different flavors to it, And I think with Gen Z, of course, there are so many things that are different about other generations, but at the end of the day, they need someone that loves them. They need belief. They need mentors. They need, to follow the way of Jesus. They need belonging. They need community. When, if you talk to people that have been in counseling, a lot of the things that they're dealing with are stuff, they're working through some of the stuff in their past with their parents, kind of treating them a certain way. So all those things to me are really similar. So it's like, but they have every generation has their unique challenges, their unique qualities, their unique ways that they think, the unique tools that they use. And so what we're trying to do is say, in many ways they're not very different, but here's some of the ways that they think or the ways they've grown up, and how can we meet them where they're at in that? And how can we kind of use best practices instead of kind of fighting against it? How do we kind of take, what they're good at, what they're experiencing, and then really speak to some of those kinds of things? So does that make sense? That's how we're going to kind of go about it. Basically, here's 5 qualities, and then we're going to go more into, from some of these qualities, what are some practices we could put into practice for each of these. So, the first one here is that they value authenticity. Of course, we know that there's, for Gen Z, there's a low trust in institutions. We grew up with a lot of scandals that you hear about, and it's from celebrities and sports figures and the church and the government, and so there's a low trust of institutions. And so there's not really kind of a high value for what big institutions, try to say. Of course, we know their ideas of be true to you, feelings are a main source of truth. And even with that, I think they don't believe in truth. They just believe that truth comes from a lot of different places. And so, and that, your truth and your feelings should kind of, there should be some sort of a match there, And so sometimes I feel like they don't know truth. I'm like, well, I think they just have more of a idea that truth can come from a lot of different ways, and you can see things, very differently. But it's more they value authenticity. They value transparency. Of course, you can catch everything on video. You think about things like Be Real coming out, for a while there, and that's the whole concept of it. Or, just some of these more platforms that are less curated, in terms of looking good. And it's more just, hey, this is what I'm doing right now, Sometimes with some of our teens, I'm like, they need to kind of curate themselves a little bit more. They're a little too authentic, where it's like, all right, brush your teeth, all that, just kind of just kind of good stuff, but like you, Lindsay. No, I'm just kidding. But of course, they're like, hey, let's talk about stuff openly. When you talk to some of the older generations, they are kind of had more of a grit and bear it, kind of mentality where it's like, okay, things are hard. We're just going to get through it. A lot of the younger is like, things are hard. We all need to talk about it and just kind of put it out in the open. And we just need to hear everybody's raw opinions on it, And we all need to go to therapy probably. So like, let's just put it all out there and then we can all go to therapy together. But they kind of value just honest, open conversation more than just kind of you just holding it all inside, In a weird way, they're actually starting to reject social media. You're starting to see some of those kind of trends where they, the millennials kind of got to be the test dummies for how that goes. And then Gen Z is like, okay, we do it better than you, and we know that it also harms us. So we're going to kind of, figure out some ways around that. Some of the Gen Z teens now say, don't give your daughter a phone. We're like, okay, thank you, but they're starting to reject some of those things. And then, they they don't want to just be taught truths. They actually want to see how things work in everyday life. So you think about like Amazon reviews. Amazon reviews are way more helpful, than any ad that you look at because you're actually looking at, does this actually work? I don't really care what you're selling me, But they don't want to just be taught the information about things because anyone can come up here and have a good message and teach information. But it's like, does it actually work though, in real life? Does anyone actually, tested it, for themselves? And so there's a big value for authenticity. So another one to me that I call it curated noise. So the idea of curation is the idea of, things that are collected, chosen, or organized in a thoughtful and intentional way, which is kind of interesting because it is a little bit antithetical to authenticity because it's all curating stuff is, like their feeds are curated to their thoughts, their desires. You can literally, there's those apps, of course, now where you can take a picture and then you can, try your own different clothes. You put clothes on you, right, from some of these, so that you can like test out which clothes look good on you and all that kind of stuff. Or like things just, you can design your own shoes or design your own, like all these things that it's really curated to their own experience. You can have anything you want in 2 days. And so, it's just a crazy world to live in, of anything you want, anything that you kind of have a preference for, any of your likes or interests, you can kind of curate your world to center around some of those things. Of course, that can breed a lot of entitlement and selfishness, because things are all about you and what you want. Someone was talking recently about the idea of going to Blockbuster as a kid. You remember that? Going to Blockbuster? You go to Blockbuster and you've been waiting all week for that movie to come out. You're so excited about it. You walk in and, they have like all the, movies up there. And then you get all the cases. You're checking them all to see if they, have DVDs in them. And then you realize they're all sold out. And you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do this Friday night now. Now I have to wait a whole nother week or 2 weeks, before it comes out. This generation doesn't have to worry about that, With streaming, you can stream what you want. You can stream the whole entire season tonight, if you wanted to, right? But everything's curated to kind of your desires and your wants. They choose what they want to listen to. They have all the information out there. And so, like, I remember, like my mother-in-law, I remember she grew up, I think was converted back in Gainesville, and she said the only place for truth was a Wednesday night midweek. That was the only place I knew how to learn about the Bible, was going on Wednesday night or going to church. And so the pulpit, or the person teaching was kind of their only source of information. Now you get the information from everywhere, out there, and you can pick and choose what your favorites are, what inspires you. And there can be some good parts to that, but again, it's kind of curating it to kind of your world and your preferences. Of course, we know that, things can be really fragmented. So a couple of phrases I've seen kind of come up are one is decentralized authority, and that kind of goes back to what I just said, where it used to be the authority was kind of like you just a lot of times had one source of authority. Now authority has been spread out to be, there's a lot of different authority figures that you can listen to. And so if you come to church on a Sunday, honestly, the pulpit becomes something, and this is for all of us now, where whoever's speaking, you are more waiting to see if you agree with what they say more than actually trying to learn from what they say. You're like, do they say what I already believe? And so that's just a difference, from previous generations. Of course, fragmented attention, to me, like there's I think maybe a misconception that our attention spans are like way lower because we listen to like 3-hour podcasts now. Like our attention spans in some ways are fine. Or you listen to a long movie or you can watch a whole season of things. It's more that like there's so much good short form content on there right now that why would I listen to a long boring thing if I can watch a really cool short cool thing, you know? But it's all like fragmented. And so instead of sitting through something that's boring, you just kind of get all these, your attention is everywhere, right? So you have fragmented attention. So that's kind of under that curated noise, you know, kind of, there's not room for your own thoughts because you're always kind of hearing all this noise coming out there from everybody else. You know, a third quality is that we're living in an increasingly diverse place. Increase in thought, culture, family, race, background, you know, and the big question is, are we preparing them for a diverse world? Because there's a lot of diversity amongst our country and where they're growing up and online. The big problem is that, and this is for all of us, that even though we live in a diverse world, because you can curate your experience, you're often not exposed to different viewpoints, and it leads you to a lot more division and mistrust because you can, even though it's really diverse out there, what you're hearing is only this curated bit. And so when now you have, and there's a lot of people that agree with you in that, and so whenever someone else has a diverse opinion, now it creates even more division because you can just huddle up with anybody in the world who thinks the same way you do. But a quality of this generation is that it's very diverse in many different kinds of ways. You know, another one is that they're very open to experiences. Very open to experiences, even religious experiences. Yoga, meditation, crystals, manifesting, you know, having boundaries, justice, making their own content, breath work, the Sabbath. I mean, like, they are very, there's a lot of experiences now that they're very open to. And you see a lot of people, like, whether they grew up in the church, like, they're atheists, they're down to kind of, I'll try some breath work, I'll try some yoga, I'll try some, you know, whatever. I think they're really open to different kinds of experiences. However, you know, often they don't have the social confidence to initiate some of those experiences, and they need someone else that can kind of initiate it, and then they might join it, but they have a hard time maybe going out and initiating those experiences themselves. You know, 2 years ago when we were talking as a conference, you know, we had Barna come out, and remember their whole study was called the Open Generation, and their whole, you know, point was just that this generation is super open, and they're very open to Jesus. They were a little bit at the time less open to the Bible because it kind of tied in back into that institutions kind of thing where they don't trust kind of the institution, but they're really open to Jesus and what he has to say. And so to me, they're very open, but in some ways, maybe in the past it used to be we thought things move from your head to your heart to your hands in the sense of you learn the information, then you believe it, and then you start doing things. Whereas now they say it actually is starting to go in reverse, where you have to kind of experience things with your hands or in an experience, then you start believing that it works, then you're more willing to kind of learn all the information, you know, about it. And so that's just a different approach to, instead of getting everyone in a room and saying, okay, let's preach the gospel, you know, at them and give them all this information, now you kind of have to build in some other experiences to help them see Jesus, experience Jesus, and then they'll be a lot more open to what you have to say about him. But there's some trends kind of working in those types of relationships. But of course, they're open to experiences, and I think they're also hungry. They're really hungry to be a part of something. I think every human is like this. They're hungry to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And I think Gen Z, you can tell, really has a hunger of wanting to be part of something bigger than themselves. Of course, they're passionate about things like justice and service and all those kind of things. But to me, one of the problems is, we just talked about this. Oh, actually, these are a couple of unique stats right here. Actually, my clicker stopped. Oh, went too far. Okay, so let's tie in this one. So they're open to experiences, but they have less real-world experiences and resilience. Here's a couple of graphs. So this is the share of high school seniors who go on a date once a month or less. So back in the 90s, basically 34% of teens went on a date at least once in that month. And now, or didn't, the share of high school seniors who go on a date once a month or less. So basically, these are teens not going on dates. So 34% of teens back in the 90s didn't go on a date in a month, basically. Now that's kind of jumped up to 71%. Just kind of an interesting finding. This is the share of high school seniors who go out for fun in a given, 1 week, once in a week or less. So back that was 22%, didn't go out for fun. Now it's 46%. So double over the last 20 years, have just don't go out for fun, anymore. This, I think, next one is about, do you have a job? These are the amount of teens that didn't that didn't work. So 22% of teens didn't work. Now it's jumped up to 35% didn't work. And so you can see, I think this next one kind of shows all those things together. Again, this isn't quite working or jumping. Oh, there we go. So this is the share of high school seniors with all of those things. So who rarely date, socialize, or work. So that's less than one date, socialize no more than once a week, and have no job. So that has increased 5 times since, 20 years ago. And so there's lacking real-world experiences, more than than the generations before them. One of the big problems with the virtual world is who's read The Anxious Generation in here? Anybody read The Anxious Generation? Fantastic book that talks so much about, this kind of stuff. One of the big problems of the virtual world is more that it takes you away from real-world experiences. And so pornography, one of the big problems with pornography is that because a young boy can go to that, they have no idea how to talk to a girl in real life. Because they play video games online and they think that's where they're getting a lot of their teamwork and fighting for something, but they don't actually know how to do that in real life. Or because they're chatting with different people online over here, they don't know how to have real conversations in real life. And so they're lacking kind of some of these real-world experiences. They actually say that there's been a big decline in substance abuse and a big decline in reckless behavior amongst young boys in particular. And a lot of that, you're like, oh yeah, it's great, less, substance abuse. And maybe there's a lot of good to that. I think another thing that it shows more, though, is just people aren't actually out in the real world doing stuff, And of course, we don't want them doing those things, but it's just kind of an overall, just kind of shows, what we're doing. So, they have Gen Z, and this is, maybe you guys can attest to this. Gen Z has trouble flirting. They have trouble building meaningful guy-girl relationships. They have a little bit more challenges talking to adults, making small talk, learning skills, putting them into practice. And this is just maybe like more of a, I don't know, like a church family thing. But I find that Gen Z is in some ways, has been less open to like encouragement dating. I think that kind of stuff is weird because, and to me, that's just a trend. I'm not even sure what to agree or disagree with that, but that's just a trend that I think this generation's like, I'm not really down for that, but let's just kind of hang out. But again, it's kind of, that used to be kind of your only way to get to know, other kinds of people. And now there's other ways to do it, and so they're just less likely to do that. They have a hard time, I think this generation feels like they have the right to a lot of things in the sense of like they have the right to believe that life shouldn't be hard. If life is hard, then it means that my rights are kind of being taken away. My life should be easier. I have the right to be not to be stressed, not to feel overwhelmed. And again, a lot of that is just because you are taken away from real life experiences and all of it has been virtualized. They have a hard time moving past the cringe. If things feel a little cringy, it's hard to know how to move past that. It used to be you had no choice. That's your only way of surviving in the world. Now you can just you can avoid it because you can go kind of other ways and do other things. And of course, we know that it's making them anxious, they're more anxious than other generations. And there's now studies, the Anxious Generation book basically told us how we used to think and have a good sense that that was the case because of smartphone use. But now we have actual evidence and proof that smartphone use and heavy media use causes anxiety and depression, and then all the things that leads to in terms of all the dangers online and the bullying that can follow you now into your bedroom, where you didn't have that before, where now you can get bullied while you're in the bathroom, from being online. And of course, that means that they're more lonely, lack relational building skills, and all that kind of stuff. So those to me are like kind of five qualities. This graph, what it shows is, this is kind of the difference between kids that grew up in church versus didn't grow up in church. And so this is the share of seniors with very little social life. And from the 90s and, from 1995 and the 2022. And so basically, the further you go up is the more religious that you are, the more you've kind of been involved in a religious community. And basically, the higher you go, people that were involved in a religious, community did better in all of these things. Kind of like we're more social. Because I think the church actually really meets a need for Gen Z right now to help them learn how to build these skills. And so I think we have a really cool opportunity to be a place where kids from all over the community can learn how to build some of these skills that they're really trying to learn how to build, but that the church gives them a platform and a place to do that. Of course, and we know all the strengths of some of those things. So those are some of the qualities. Now I'm just going to kind of go through some just ideas of how to minister to each one of those kinds of things. And then I love your guys. So like this handout is for you to kind of take down some ideas as it comes to you. But then I would love to hear, how are you trying to engage with some of these different qualities where you are? Because I think it helps all of us just have ideas, of how to do that. But of course, with authenticity, it's of course you got to practice being authentic, being humble, which means you don't need to have all the answers. Of course, as youth ministers, we always feel like we need to have all the answers. And I think they actually appreciate way more when you say, I don't know the answer to this, than if you have all the answers to certain things. And I think at the end of the day, it's authentically following Jesus yourself, not playing church, But I think they need to see our walk with Jesus authentically in terms of the valleys, the mountaintops, and everything in between. But the more that you just share authentically, just kind of how you're walking with Jesus, I think that means more to them than any lesson or things that you can teach them. I know you have some more on that too.
Mm-hmm. This is for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, someone gave it to me, so maybe you sound rough. Yeah, I think the only danger with like a class like this, ministering to Gen Z, it like automatically does an us and them thing, which can automatically make you go a little bit like, okay, how do I minister to you, and am I saying the right thing, right? And I love that phrase, like they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And how like love covers over a multitude of I don't knows. Love covers over a multitude of like, I really don't relate. Like I can tell there's a cultural difference just by the 10, 15, 20-year age gap. There's a cultural difference we're coming from, but love covers over a multitude of that. Romans 15, Paul says, I am convinced, brothers and sisters, that you're full of goodness. And I love that he has that in the middle of his letter, saying like, and that's why I'm teaching you these things. That's why I want to keep you teaching. I'm convinced you're full of goodness. And I think I've noticed that like, if I'm coming from that perspective, first of all in my heart, but then in my speech and my body language towards them, I'm like, I'm convinced you're full of goodness. Like, you are good inside. I love you. Like that opens up totally anybody, Gen Z or whatever generation, that just opens up their eyes and ears to hear where you might want to lead them. And I think that is all I wanted to say about that.
Perfect. Awesome. And so you can just take note of how do you build authenticity into your ministry or into your own personal just kind of ministering. So for curated noise, to me, this is a big thing of teaching them how to think, not just what to think. They need to learn how to think for themselves. I had a boy that I was studying with recently, and I was like, so why do you want to study the Bible? He's like, I know it's a good thing to do, and so that's why I'm here. I know you're just going to make me into it, so tell me what to do. And I would ask him, okay, so what do you think about this scripture? He's like, what should I think about this scripture? And it was just, to me, it was just a laziness if he didn't want to think about it, and we had to work through that and say, dude, it's only going to work if you're kind of engaging yourself, and it's not just a conveyor belt of people are going to think for you, and then you're going to pop out, a follower of Jesus. They have to learn how to think and how to engage in thinking. But to me, another cool thing to do with this is just teaching them how to curate information in the sense of it's important to teach them that there's always another side. With anything you ever see online, anything you ever see out there, there's always another perspective. And I think it's helpful bringing in other perspectives that they can engage with so they don't automatically just think, oh yeah, this is the way that it is. But I think we have to engage, tell them how to think. A cool thing we can do to leverage these strengths is let them curate some of their own experiences within the ministry. So let them curate their retreat experience, Ask them, what do you want to do? Can you design, all these kind of different things? I loved what you guys talked about in Boston with kind of doing that teen-led conference. Let them curate, their experience. I think they get really excited, about some of those kind of things. I think, of course, it's so important to kind of teach them the why behind everything, because if not, we're just going to, again, they're going to kind of take what we give them often, and we have to help teach them to think deeper, or where it comes from, or why it comes from there. Because, again, that's all just teaching them not just how to, like, intake information, but how to really think deeply for themselves. And to me, another huge thing is just to model and teach listening. I think listening is not a very widely, strong skill. I'm amazed at how often I interact with people. I'm like, they haven't asked me a question, in the last 30 minutes. And they haven't, or when they're listening, they're kind of listening, but I know their eyes are going, or I think listening is a skill you have to learn you have to practice it. You have to become better, at it. But it's teaching them to listen to others, also to themselves. How do you listen? How do you teach them how to listen to themselves? I know Brie's going to talk more about that in a minute, but then also teaching them how to listen to God, I think, is also a really important part of this. Not just, again, in taking all this information, but how do you really listen instead of just kind of like, passively scroll through some of these things. So some of these things are like teaching contemplative rhythms, like silence and stillness, not just constant noise, slowing down to let your soul catch up with your body, prayer as communion with God, not just a transaction, with God, but teaching them some of these contemplative rhythms, I think, is so important.
Well, one time, Marty Solomon, who does the Bema podcast, he's come to North River a few times, and afterwards we asked him, like, hey, how do you help kids who just, like, hate reading, right? Like, how do you help them learn the scriptures? Like, what are just some practical ways to help them learn to love reading when they really hate reading? And he was like, don't. He was like, teach them how to journal. Like, teach them how to figure out what's already in there, how to get it out of there, like how to understand what's already going on inside. It's kind of like the Titanic, where like everything looked really good, but after they hit the iceberg on the top deck, but the bottom deck was in chaos and like on fire. It's like a lot of times you just see like there's so much content intake that there's almost a disassociation, almost like a blank face of I don't even know what to think, how to think, because I've taken in so much. So I need some help figuring out how to like calm the fires that's going on inside. And so one thing that we've found really helpful is with every Bible study that we do, giving some, especially for the girls, I don't know if the guys rock with this as much, but especially for the girls, like giving great journal prompts and then having them come back with each study with like what they've journaled through and like just great journal questions, like really specific and maybe a few of them. And that way they're coming back like, I've got some things from inside me that I'm bringing rather than I'm just taking in. So it's just helping them practice interior examination. I don't know, I'm just seeing that's like, does a lot of the work.
And I'm really excited to hear some of your guys' thoughts about this. When it comes to diversity, to me, it's just exposing them to a wide variety of different speakers, leaders, teachers. Sometimes as a youth minister, when you're maybe one of the only ones in your church helping, they see you all the time. I think it's really important to see a diverse, group of people that are teaching them, helping them. And then I think it's also really important to present both sides of an argument. Don't tell them what your thought is on it and just let them hash it out. And then kind of be there as a guide, but say, hey, this is a thought, this is another thought. What do you think? And I think helping them engage in those kind of, and knowing just how tension is okay. It's okay to have tension. The whole Bible is holding things with two hands. This is true, this is also true, this is also true, And I think teaching them those things, helping model that stuff can be so important. With open to experiences, to me, man, there's so many, like building, I'm trying to get better at building experiences into my Bible studies. Instead of just having a Bible study on this topic, how do I build experiences into it? Like I know that's been a culture we've had with like a confession study. We talk about sin, and then a great practice is we confess sin. That's why I think it can be so meaningful and helpful. But, for like a word study, we're like, all right, go read your Bible. But then there's a lot of other things that maybe we don't have specific practices for. But instead of a study, maybe you take them on a prayer walk. You say, hey, this week we're going to fast together, or we're going to journal together. Or to me, like, there are so many things that Jesus did that wasn't just teaching them information, but kind of bringing them into different experiences. Things like, I love hey, why don't you go back and study this out, and why don't you come back and do a 5-minute lesson for me, on this. But again, it's just kind of helping them experience, things themselves, sharing your faith together, having different retreats. That's why camp is so great, because it's all these things kind of mixed into one week, where you're away from all the noise, that you're getting an experience, you're doing it within community. That's why we know that camp can be so helpful and inspiring. Building experiences into your ministry, and not just talks, not just more midweek lessons, but service opportunities, retreats, doing like Lectio Divina kind of times, guided meditation, media fasts, banquets together, art nights together, but just holistic experiences that help not just their mind, but their body and their heart, as well. But I think we could get really creative about how we build experiences into our different ministries. And then just for the sake of time, I'll just go to this last one. Or do you have anything else on that one? This last one, with lacking real-world experiences, I think it's just some ideas, is give them jobs in the ministry and have them own it. Have them have not just a task, but give them responsibility and have them totally own it. Don't be afraid to ask them to do hard things. I think sometimes, and maybe it's because of the culture I grew up in, where there was a little bit of just figure it out and do it, even if you're not feeling good about it. Maybe I feel like for me, I swing to the other side of things, where if something's hard for one of my teens, I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, I told you to do that. You don't have to do it. Never mind, But I think there's times, and we need wisdom in that, but I think ask them to do hard things. They're capable of doing hard things. And there's stress, there's good stress. Stress is so helpful for us a lot of times. Resistance can be really helpful for us a lot of times, because it makes us stronger, And so ask them to do hard things, but then give them your full support, behind some of these things. There's another book. It talks about, like, in the school systems, they found that there's one piece of feedback on homework assignments or a test that produces better results than any other form of feedback. And it was this feedback of, I gave you this feedback because I believe in you and I know you can do better. And what that is it's both high belief, but also high challenge, And so I'm giving you this feedback because I believe in you and I know you can do better. And I think when you are out of balance at one of those two, where you have all this belief but no challenge, then I don't think they kind of really go anywhere. But if it's all challenge but no belief behind it, then that can get out of whack too. But how do we believe, but then also call them to something higher? And there's so many other good things in that, calling out their specific gifts, giving them opportunities to use it, creating space for community. And we've heard that before you need to feel like you belong before you believe. And so we need to create space of belonging where they feel and they experience real community and belonging. And then they'll be way more likely to believe certain things, instead of we're like, hey, believe this, and then you can belong. But we have to help them feel belonging and experience that first, and then they'll believe. So anyway, those are just a few different practices. Of course, this is something I pray all the time. It's just that Ephesians 1 prayer of just the eyes of your heart. I don't have to go into that prayer, but it's just a prayer that I'll pray for the teens all the time, just their eyes being opened and our eyes being opened to what is happening and being aware of the times. But I would love just to hear your guys' feedback on, out of all of these, what have been some practices in each of these categories that you feel like has been really cool in your ministry that you'd love to share that you've seen, or any other comments about some of those things? I think we got 2 mics. Yeah.
I'm going to pass you the mic whenever you raise your hand. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antonio. I'm from the Columbia Church of Christ. My wife is not here. We started serving in the teens ministry a year ago, and recently, it's so interesting, we have one teen disciple, and we just happened to have, out of one teen disciple, 2 studies in the space of 2 months. And it all happened because I was just giving one of his friends a ride, and he volunteered to come to the Bible study with us. And I found that the biggest thing is the authenticity part, especially with young guys in particular. They need to see that the person that they look up to also has weaknesses that they can relate to. Like, oh, Antonio does get angry, but he doesn't lash out in his anger. Oh, Antonio's wife can be annoying. Like, I do feel annoyed by my wife, and I tell them sometimes, like, bro, honestly, I'm not feeling 100% today. Me and my wife, we kind of disagreed on something. And they're like, oh, well, how do you go about disagreeing with a girl? Because I'm interested in this girl in school, and we have arguments. Antonio, can you walk me through what it's like to talk to the opposite sex. So I think authenticity has been the bedrock of our ministry. No matter how much resources or fun you have, teens will always pick up when you're not being authentic. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Courtney. My husband and I serve in Denver. I really love the open to experiences part because I've experienced that so much when I'm in a Bible study or I'm teaching something, and then you're explaining something to a teen, and then they seem like they get it, but then there's not a lot of follow through or change that will occur from that. And sometimes it can just feel like I'm a broken record, saying the same things, and then I get a bunch of blank stares back. So I think I really like the idea of building the practices and experiences into the Bible studies. But I even liked how you said in one of the parts, teach them how to have conversations. Because I think I forget that, we're Gen Z, but our teens, the younger Gen Z, they really don't know how to talk to people or have conversations anymore. And so one of the things that we did with our disciples a while ago, our team minister did with us, but we have monthly disciple training times, and we had something called 2-minute drills where we would have 2 teens go up. We give them a prompt, we'll give them each a persona, and then one of them has to practice sharing their faith with this random persona that they get. Which I'm even thinking we need to incorporate that more, even in how they have conversations with their peers, or how to get deeper, or how to talk about spiritual things. But I do think this generation needs a lot more hands-on, let me show you how, instead of just the information overload. So I appreciate that.
Hello. Oh, sorry. That was so loud. I'm Jade. Me and my husband lead in Chicago. And going along with what Courtney was sharing, I think we've only been doing this for 2 years. We're also Gen Z, by the way. If you couldn't tell, you can. And I think 2 of this series, the semester series that we found were whoa, that really seemed to hit in a different way. Was we did one that was called Big Questions, and I was honestly really scared because I was I have no answers. I was Aaron, how are we going to do a series on big questions when I have no answers? But I think that authenticity, they actually really respected that we asked questions and we were we don't have all the answers, and they actually really respected that. And they felt comfortable asking their own big questions. The first lesson that we did that semester was does God exist? And I think 10 years ago, you're duh, of course he exists. But now they're no, I actually don't know. And so having that conversation, I think, was scary, but also really encouraging. There were people who talked who have never talked ever. And I was you can talk. And then another series going with the practical thing is we literally just called it 101, because we were they don't talk to each other. And that was maybe less successful because they probably need more than a semester of 101. But we were okay, this week, talk to one person at church that you've never talked to before. And if you come back and you tell us the conversation you had, we'll enter you for a prize at the end of the semester. And so the whole semester, it was a raffle where they were doing these challenges. And they were do I really have to? And I'm if you want the prize, sure. But then I was guys, the prize is life and social skills. You did it. So it was helpful. Well, no, there actually was a real prize. But when they didn't win it, because it was a raffle, I was but the rest of you still won.
Yeah, good. Yeah, love it. Thanks. Somebody else have it. Lindsay.
Hi. Whoa. Hi, my name is Lindsay. I'm from North River. Yeah, I think 2 things came up as you guys were talking, but specifically with the authenticity piece, I think I've just been in youth and family ministry for the last 1.5 years, but I think the thing that I've seen just them, yearn for, or what they've responded so well to is one, authenticity, and being able to make a fool of yourself, and just something about me just literally being the least cool person in the room and literally just being so stupid, just immediate guard down kind of a thing. As soon as I make a joke about myself or something, like suddenly I'm their best friend. And I don't know, I don't think I'm also Gen Z, but I don't think that's something I ever consciously thought about. But in this role the last year and a half, I've realized the more I'm like willing to like make a fool of myself, whatever that might look like doing some crazy event or doing some sort of costume or bald cap, whatever it is, like they just like eat that kind of stuff up. Like, wow, I'm like, oh wow, we're so close all of a sudden, all because I made a joke about something. But so I think that's a big thing, like just kind of being real, like not trying to like, I don't know, seem like you know what you're doing. Like I've seen them appreciate that. And then secondly, what was it? Like authenticity in I'm forgetting what it was now. But if it comes back to me, I'll say it. But yeah, that's it.
Great. Yeah, any other things you're doing in your ministry that are just kind of like helping out with some of these things?
Thanks. I got a couple things, but the second one is a question. The first thing, something we started like 2 years ago that's seemed pretty fruitful, is at the end of each semester, we'll do like a reflection devotional with our teens to reflect on the past semester and things that have gone on, and especially emphasizing like how they've seen God working in their lives over the past semester, and that seemed to be fruitful and like helpful with the teens. But I had a question with giving teens responsibility because in general, it's been pretty funny for us, but I was wondering about like structure for that, and especially like training our teens with like through that and helping them, have these kind of experiences, giving them responsibility, even like doing hard things. Like I believe in that, but I think it's been hard to like consistently give them things and them respond well to it in a way that's helping them grow. And so I was just wondering what other people are doing that's like helpful in that arena.
Just something came to my mind with a girl that I was mentoring first. She's one of my students in middle school, and I started mentoring her. And as she went into the teen, she started like, there's some things that really bother me about the teen ministry. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about it. And so she just started talking specifically about that they don't talk. and she was very shy as well. So it was really neat to talk her through specifically like what she was looking for and what she felt it would help if they were talking more, if the kids were getting together, like when they got together for their teen devotionals. And I said, guess what? I said, you're feeling very strongly about this, so God is calling you to fix it. And it just kind of evolved where we had our weekly times, and it was like this touching base and like, okay, how'd it go this week? And it was all her initiative. When I said, this is your superpower, like, because you see it. Nobody else sees it. Nobody else cares. And so what I learned from that was to draw out, like, I mean, I don't work with a lot of the teens. I'm mostly middle school, but I do mentor and study the Bible with some of the girls. So, but yeah, like always trying to figure out like, well, what is God putting on your heart that like is kind of bothering you? That's not like when you go into the teen group, what do you care about? What do you want to see improve? Because that's like a little thing that God is giving you that he wants you to do something with. And so let's figure that out, and she grew so tremendously that it evolved into her parents even buying a new house so that she could have people over and create like fellowship and have sleepovers. And it just like blew within like a year of this conversation of her developing this superpower. Yeah. It's Emma, if anybody wants, her name is Emma.
I think one thing I've recently learned about responsibility with teens, each teen have a different feeling towards responsibility, and that's usually rooted on how their parents feel about their responsibility. Like sometimes teens don't want to take on a responsibility because they don't want to experience disappointment from you if you're their friend. And so like, I think one thing I've learned is, okay, first ask them, what do they like to do? Teens don't want you to tell them to do something that they don't like to do, first of all. What do you like to do? And give them the vision to do it and make it a space where you're okay if they disappoint you. If you're not okay with them disappointing you, then that's something that you need to work on in your heart. And that's one thing I learned about teens, like make it okay for them to fail, because they're going to think that it's not okay for them to fail as a Christian. especially.
I found too is either like one, I don't know, like I go down one or two roads with that. Either like you know what, or you know, it's the I'll just let them keep doing how they're doing it, and I just don't like either of those answers. So it's more just it just takes time to find the next answer. I don't think there's like a it's just going to kind of be a little bit messy, and that's okay, and you kind of just keep figuring it out. But I just feel like I tend towards the I'll just do it, you know. But that doesn't go good for me either, you know. And so that actually puts a lot more stress on me, and the ministry does worse. And so I just gotta keep figuring that out and keep just trying to believe and then trust, and then you start seeing stuff slowly but surely, and then anything good you see, you just like, that was incredible, you know. Let's keep doing that, and just kind of celebrate what you want more of, you know. And I think that just comes with working through some of the awkward, you know, hair stages, you know, with that until it gets to where you really want it to be. So I think that's
Man, that's great, man. I love this, and I love all the ideas that everybody brought up. I love being able to see how simple Gen Z really is from the diversity. I loved how one sister talked about having mock trials with sharing their faith. That was awesome. Something that we do, my wife and I are in the Los Angeles ministry, and we're the Army of Two for our youth ministry. And so something that I feel like we've done really well is we will facilitate talks, and we'll have all of our teens in little pods just to build that authenticity of we have 90% kingdom kids in our ministry. And so they all have baggage with certain words associated to things like study the Bible. There's a lot of feelings. Disciple has a lot of feelings. And so we opened it up to every week we'd have 3 words that we'd focus on. Okay, what comes to mind when you think of the word disciple? Boy, did those hands shoot up. It's a bunch of old people who pressure you to study the Bible, and if you don't study the Bible, then they don't want anything to do with you. And what I loved about it is it was a gambit, but we got to meet them where they were and engage their prefrontal cortex and say, well, do you think it's the whole church, or were there only a few people in the church? Well, it was like this person and that person, so it's just a couple people. Have you felt that from the leadership, from anyone? No, but I think that's just, so everybody got to learn together. Oh, it's not what we thought, because there were just a couple personal experiences, but discipleship meant to focus on Jesus, not his disciples. Got it. And then church is just a place where people play church, and then you're like, well, let's break it down, guys. And so we weren't afraid of their answers because we weren't looking for anything specific. And we also, we created, instead of having teen leaders meetings to help delegate work for the teen ministry, we had the disciples and whoever else wanted to be involved. I said, guys, on Monday night, come to our house, disciple or not, and we will help create a ministry that is truly yours. And we will help fuel you. If you guys say, even if you say skydiving, you want to do it, we will flesh it out, and you will learn how difficult it is to drive 4 hours and to pay $200 a person to go. And then they go, got it, not a great idea. But I didn't have to shut it down in the moment. I got to walk them through. So how are you going to get them there? I think everyone should be able to drive 4 hours. And then the rest of the group says, that's ridiculous. So I just think just engaging their prefrontal cortex and enjoying not having teen leaders because they are teen leaders. Anyways.
And that's all those in one. It's like you're being authentic. You're teaching them how to think. You're teaching them why to think a certain way. Those are good. Just some of those open conversations. Love that. Yeah, here and over there.
I go? Okay. We do like a panel after like, what is this? Teen camp. But you'd be shocked how much like a panel can help too. I mean, listen, if we take credit, I mean, that's a really good thing that I get excited about. But with the panel, what you get to see is you grab kids from different age groups, right? Ones that can answer questions, put something together. But you get to show the church, and they get to see the answers. They get to see what they learned from teen camp and things like that. And one of the questions that we asked them was, what do you need from us, right? As a church, right? Your family, they're looking all at you, all these grown-ups here. What can we do to help? And one of the things they said was we just want you to talk to us. You know, so and I think the minister told us too, like what that panel did for the actual believers, just the members in the church, they wanted more of it. You know, so just a simple panel can do wonders to get an idea where your kids are at and to see what you can do to help those kids as well, because like you said, you need help. Sometimes it feels like it's only 2 people doing it, but if you can get them to help you, the members, it's huge.
It's great. A panel with all of them too. To me is so much more or anything you can get them to do with a team of friends, or with others is so much better than having them do things by themselves, whether it's responsibility or teaching a class. Give them a panel, and then they're doing it with their friends. But that community, that diversity of thought, all that stuff is so good. Yeah.
I have a question. So our teen ministry is 4 teens. 2 of them are our kids. So it's sort of a parenting question too. But it's like one of the things that we see that our kids struggle with is like living the countercultural life as they are teens and trying to follow Jesus and building the grit and resilience in them. Like, how do you guys help with that? Like building the grit and resilience in teens with as far as like living in the world that they're living in now and trying to be different from it.
Are there any parents in here of teens that would be able to help answer that, or parents in general that would be able to answer some of that question? Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm an expert, but I think the first thing that came to mind was you have to let them fail to produce grit. That's with perseverance comes hope, right? And I think that being able to create the space where when they do fail, that you celebrate the success in it and you go, okay, what have you learned from this? Like, where can we be open in our own failures? And that's something, we are a parent of a teen, but we also have a 9 and a 5-year-old. And I've noticed my 9-year-old's very hard on himself. Like he internalizes a lot of his emotions, and when he fails hard. And that's because we fail and fail hard. And I've started trying to model, and I imagine with 4, it's a little bit easier to model it and to show them. But when I fail and I apologize, and he's like, "It's fine, Mom. We make mistakes." I'm like, you know what? I'm going to forgive myself too. And I think just being very explicit with, I did fail, I'm getting back up, I apologize, and I'm going to move forward rather than dwelling in it. That's what produces grit in me, and I think is modeling that for my son. And we've been through a lot with our oldest, and I think that being with her through the failure and walking her through that and going, you know what, it's okay to fall down. We all fall down, but how are you going to get back up? Like, what are we going to do together to do that? And what supports do you need to be able to do that successfully? So, not an expert, but that's what I got.
Something else I've learned or heard too with praise is sometimes it's helpful to know what to praise. So a lot of times we praise, you're so smart, you're so good at this, you're so wonderful in these ways, but then when they don't match that at some point, then they feel bad about themselves. And so it's better to praise the effort. It's better to praise the journey to get there. I'm so proud of how much you worked for that, grade. I'm so proud of how much you've, been patient, through this. But kind of praising the journey, and praising the process, I think helps them learn that the grit is what's valuable, not necessarily whatever outcome, comes from some of that. But Eric, how about we go here, and then Eric, and I think we ought to be done.
You too. Also not an expert, but I will comment on that because recently my daughter, I came back from a conference speaking about this teenager that did something great at the school. And my daughter said, well, I'm going to start a Bible talk. I got to figure it out. I want to do something online. And she was like, it needs a name. So we tried to come up with names. I gave her suggestions. She didn't like any of my suggestions. I think it's because I'm dad. So I said, all right, cool. She came up with a great idea, Glow, God Lights Our Way. And she set up a Zoom link, and she was excited, and nobody showed up. And then she didn't want to do it anymore. And the response to that, my wife and I had to walk her through, was grace and perseverance, right? So grace, that you got to give yourself grace. It's okay. I talked to her about the scripture that says, do not despise humble beginnings or small beginnings, right? It's okay. Sometimes it'll be 0. Sometimes it's 1. We talked through authenticity. I shared many times when I've tried something new and it just failed, but God still loves me. It's okay. Keep trying. And perseverance, the only way to mature, this is the grit part, the only way to mature is that you got to persevere. It's not called perseverance because it's always good. It's called perseverance because you got to push through the challenge. And we talked a lot about how building muscle requires resistance and requires you doing something to failure, and then you grow.
Yeah, just real quick. And Ingrid, you asked that question a moment ago, right? So just a few quick things. The person on the other side, I think, answered very well with your initial response. So I don't want to like double down on what you said, but I will just finish up from Sir Lennox. You were talking, right? That's you, right? Yeah. So James 1:2-4 comes to mind. Count it all joy, brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith produces what? Perseverance. And so and then ultimately we have hope as a result of that. So that comes to mind, one thing. And as well, I just think on this whole like grit and resilience thing, honestly, this is one of my biggest concerns for our families that have like really young kids. I'm noticing, I don't know about you guys, that we are building children that are not resilient because they're not stretched when they're young. So it doesn't answer your question directly, but I would just say, like, be mindful. I'd encourage you guys to like help build resilience, or encourage families to build resilience into their younger children, because that resilience will follow them as time goes on. And the more resilient we are, the more resilient our kids tend to be as well.
You know, all this to me is just trying to, in light of just trying to meet them where they're at, and help them where they're at. I heard an older gentleman recently at a conference say, he's like, I've taken a phrase out of my vocabulary when I was your age. He's like, I've taken that out of my vocabulary. I've never been their age at this time in the world. I don't know what it's like. And so I'm just taking that out because it immediately isn't relatable. And so all this to me is just trying to meet them where they're at and honor, where they're at with their particular strengths, weaknesses, challenges, victories. I think they're going to help us in so many different ways, kind of navigate through some of our challenges. And so they're a great gift. One of the things I would recommend is something that we did in our ministry, is taking some of those qualities, putting it on a whiteboard, and then just kind of brainstorming as whatever team that you have, and brainstorming what are some things we can do as a ministry or personally that just and then taking some of those and putting it on the calendar and just trying stuff, and just having a little brainstorm session together. And that's why we did the handout, just to try to get your brain going and taking it back to your team and saying, okay, with our ministry, what could be helpful with some of these things, and just starting to plug in different ideas. But anyway, I'm just going to say a quick prayer and then we'll be done. And I actually don't know we're back in here at 4.